Welcome, Tarnished, to a journey into the deepest mysteries of Elden Ring. As you settle in for rest, let us explore the cosmic forces that shape the lands between from beyond mortal understanding. This is a tale of gods that exist outside reality itself, entities so vast and incomprehensible that they can only touch our world through chosen vessels and subtle corruptions. The outer gods are not characters in a story, but the authors of reality itself. They are puppet masters pulling strings from dimensions we cannot perceive, shaping existence according to designs our minds struggle to grasp. Each represents not just power, but an entirely different philosophy of what reality should be, what life should become, what death should mean. In the sprawling tapestry of Elden Ring's lore, few concepts inspire such simultaneous fascination and terror. These beings transcend the physical realm, wielding power that dwarfs even the mightiest demigods. They are outer, because they exist beyond the boundaries of the world we know, beyond conventional understanding. They are gods because they possess power that makes emperors and warriors seem insignificant. What makes the outer gods particularly intriguing is their indirect influence. Unlike demigods who stride across battlefields, these cosmic entities cannot manifest directly in the physical world. They must work through proxies, through chosen vessels, through corruption that seeps into reality like water through cracks in stone. Each outer god offers competing visions of existence, and in their cosmic struggle for dominance, the lands between has become a battleground where their influences clash and merge in ways both beautiful and horrifying. The history of the lands between can be understood as a succession of ages, each dominated by different outer gods. Before the Erd Tree, before Queen Marika, before the Golden Order, other powers held sway. Ancient dragons served mysterious deities. Fire giants worshipped their fell god. Deathbirds carried out the will of entities associated with ghost flame and the natural cycle of death and rebirth. Understanding the outer gods is crucial to understanding Elden Ring's deepest themes. This is not simply political intrigue among demigods fighting over inheritance. This is cosmic horror about incomprehensible forces using mortals as pawns in games beyond understanding. It explores the price of power, the corruption that comes with divine influence, and the terrible beauty that emerges when cosmic forces attempt to remake reality in their own image. Over the course of this exploration, we will examine each major outer god in detail, uncovering their nature, their methods of influence, their chosen champions, and their ultimate visions for reality. We will explore the Greater Will's architecture of order, the Frenzied Flame's chaos incarnate, the Formless Mother's bloody truths, the God of Rot's transformative decay, and many other cosmic forces that have shaped the world. As you drift towards sleep, let these cosmic mysteries wash over you. The outer gods exist in a realm beyond dreams, yet their influence touches every soul that has ever walked beneath the Erd Tree's golden light. Their stories are vast, ancient, and eternally relevant to anyone who has wondered about the nature of divine power and mortal destiny. We begin with the most prominent outer god, the one whose influence has defined the current age. The Greater Will stands apart from other cosmic entities, not just in its dominance, but in what it fundamentally represents. Where other outer gods might be forces of nature or cosmic principles, the Greater Will appears to be something more, a supreme creative force, a cosmic architect with power to fracture reality itself and remake it according to its vision. The Greater Will's origins are shrouded in mystery. Those touched by the Frenzied Flame speak of a time before current reality, claiming all that exists came from something called the One Great, a primordial unity that encompassed everything. According to this perspective, the Greater Will fractured this original oneness, creating the multiplicity of existence we now know. Whether this account represents historical truth or the Frenzied Flame's own interpretation of cosmic events remains ambiguous, yet it provides insight into why these two forces stand in such stark opposition. This act of cosmic creation through destruction reveals something fundamental about the Greater Will's nature. It is a force that creates through division, that brings order through the imposition of boundaries and separations. Where once there was unity, the Greater Will created distinction. Where once there was wholeness, it created fragments that could be arranged, organized, controlled. The greater will's method of influence is more sophisticated than other outer gods. Rather than relying solely on corruption or gradual influence, it dispatched a living embodiment of its power, the Elden Beast. This golden star fell from the heavens in ages past, carrying within it the cosmic force that would become the Elden Ring itself. The Elden Beast is not merely a vessel or servant. It is the greater will's power made manifest, a living representation of cosmic order. The choice of form is telling in many ways. It resembles a great dragon, echoing the ancient dragons that once ruled the lands between. This may not be coincidence. The greater will's power seems to work by building upon existing structures, by co-opting and transforming what came before, rather than simply destroying and replacing. The greater will established an entire infrastructure of divine communication through Meta, Mother of Fingers, and her children, the Two Fingers. These beings serve as intermediaries, able to communicate the greater will's desires to mortals and identify suitable candidates for divine elevation. The Two Fingers possess the crucial ability to recognize and select Empyreans, those rare individuals capable of becoming vessels for divine power. The relationship between the greater will and Queen Marika reveals much about how this outer god operates. Marika was chosen as an Empyrean, elevated to godhood, and made the vessel for the Elden Ring. But this was not simple divine favor. The greater will bound Marika to its will, making her both immensely powerful and utterly constrained. She became the living embodiment of the Golden Order, but at the cost of her freedom to act against the greater will's design. Through Marika, the greater will imposed its vision of perfect order upon the lands between. This order was characterized by rigid hierarchy, clear distinctions between worthy and unworthy, and the suppression of anything that threatened the established system. The Golden Order became a religious and political system that justified the greater will's rule, while systematically eliminating alternative sources of power and alternative ways of understanding existence. The greater will's order is fundamentally about control. It seeks to create a reality where everything has its proper place, where change occurs only according to divine will, where the natural chaos of existence is held in check by imposed structure. This is why aspects of the primordial crucible were suppressed, not because they were inherently evil, but because they represented a more chaotic, more natural way of being that threatened the artificial order the greater will sought to maintain. Yet for all its power, the greater will is not omnipotent. The shattering of the Elden Ring represents a moment when its control faltered, when the very vessel it had chosen to embody, its will rebelled against the constraints placed upon her. Marika's act of shattering the Elden Ring was perhaps the only form of rebellion available to her to break the very symbol and source of the order she was forced to maintain. In response to this crisis, the greater will appears to have withdrawn much of its direct influence. The guidance of grace that once clearly showed the path forward became intermittent, uncertain. The Two Fingers lost their ability to communicate clearly with their cosmic patron. In desperation, the greater will recalled the tarnished, those who had been previously exiled from its grace, hoping that these outcasts might succeed where its chosen champions had failed. This withdrawal reveals something important about the greater will's limitations. For all its cosmic power, it requires willing vessels to enact its will in the physical world. It cannot simply impose its order through divine fiat. It must work through mortal agents who can choose to obey or rebel. This dependency creates vulnerabilities that other outer gods have been quick to exploit. The greater will's influence extends beyond politics and religion into the very fabric of reality itself. The golden color that suffuses so much of the lands between is more than mere aesthetic choice. It represents the greater will's power, made visible, the golden light of grace, the golden glow of the Erd Tree, the golden threads that connect sites of grace across the landscape. All of these are manifestations of the greater will's presence in the world. Perhaps most significantly, the greater will represents a particular approach to the fundamental problems of existence. Where other outer gods might embrace change, decay, chaos, or transformation, the greater will seeks to freeze reality in a perfect eternal form. It envisions a cosmos where suffering ends not through transcendence or acceptance, but through the imposition of a perfect order where suffering becomes impossible because everything exists in its proper, ordained place. This vision has a terrible beauty to it, but also a terrible cost. The Greater Will's order requires the suppression of natural processes, the denial of change and growth, the elimination of anything that cannot be controlled or categorized. In seeking to create a perfect world, it risks creating a dead world, a cosmos so rigidly ordered that it loses the vitality that makes existence meaningful. The Greater Will's treatment of those it deems impure reveals the darker side of its quest for perfection. The omens, born with horns and grotesque features, are hidden away or killed at birth, their existence a threat to the aesthetic perfection of the Golden Order. The misbegotten, the Albinaurics, the merchants accused of heresy, all represent variations of life that the Greater Will's order cannot accommodate, and thus must be eliminated or suppressed. The concept of grace itself, the golden light that guides chosen individuals, represents the Greater Will's method of selecting and directing mortal agents. Those who can see grace are blessed, given purpose and direction. Those who cannot are tarnished, cast out and deemed unworthy. Yet the fickle nature of grace, the way it can be granted and withdrawn seemingly at whim, reveals how the Greater Will views mortals as tools to be used and discarded according to divine need. As we will see when examining other outer gods, the Greater Will's influence looms over all alternatives. It is the dominant force that other powers must either accommodate or actively resist. Its vision of reality has shaped the lands between so completely that even those who oppose it must do so within frameworks and categories that the Golden Order established. Standing in direct opposition to the Greater Will's vision of perfect order is perhaps the most terrifying of all outer gods, the entity behind the Frenzied Flame. Where the Greater Will seeks to create structure, boundaries, and hierarchy, the Frenzied Flame desires nothing less than the complete annihilation of all distinctions, the melting away of everything the Greater Will has created, and the return to a primordial state of undifferentiated unity. The very existence of the Frenzied Flame seems to be a cosmic response to the Greater Will's act of fracturing the One Great. If the Greater Will represents the principle of division and distinction, then the Frenzied Flame represents the opposite principle, the drive toward unity through destruction, the desire to undo the cosmic violence that created multiplicity and return to the original state of oneness. This opposition is symbolized most directly through the relationship between the two fingers and the three fingers. The Greater Will communicates through the two fingers, while the Frenzied Flame speaks through the three fingers. Together, they would form a complete hand of 5 fingers, suggesting that these two cosmic forces may once have been unified aspects of a single entity, split apart in some primordial cosmic trauma. The three fingers exist in a state that perfectly embodies their cosmic patron's nature. Unlike the pristine golden 2 fingers that serve the Greater Will, the 3 fingers are burned, smoldering, tortured entities dwelling in the deepest sewers beneath Landel. They are imprisoned, hidden away from the light of order, dwelling in filth and darkness. This is not mere symbolic staging. It reflects the fundamental relationship between order and chaos, between the recognized and the suppressed, between what is admitted into the light and what is forced into the shadows. The origin story of the Frenzied Flame is a tale of cosmic injustice and the birth of something terrible from unbearable suffering. Long ago, there existed a great caravan of merchants, nomadic people who traveled the trade routes of the world. These merchants were accused of heretical beliefs by the authorities of their time. Rather than face persecution openly, the entire caravan was rounded up and buried alive beneath the capital. In those depths, facing slow death by suffocation and starvation, surrounded by the corpses of their loved ones, the surviving merchants did what desperate people have always done when faced with absolute injustice. They cursed their oppressors and called upon powers beyond mortal understanding to grant them vengeance. Their suffering, their despair, their rage became a beacon that attracted the attention of the Frenzied Flame. In response to their cries for revenge, the Frenzied Flame answered, transforming their anguish into a cosmic force of destruction. This origin story reveals something crucial about the Frenzied Flame's nature. Unlike other outer gods that might be seen as natural forces or cosmic principles, the Frenzied Flame appears to be directly responsive to suffering and injustice. It is drawn to those who have been abandoned, persecuted, driven to despair by the very order that the greater will seeks to maintain. In this sense, the Frenzied Flame can be understood as a cosmic antibody, a response to the pathologies that develop when order becomes too rigid, too cruel, too indifferent to suffering. It represents the universe's immune response to systems that have become so corrupt and oppressive that they must be completely destroyed rather than reformed. The madness associated with the Frenzied Flame is not random insanity, but a very specific form of consciousness that emerges when the boundaries between self and other begin to break down. Those touched by the Frenzied Flame begin to see through the illusions of separation that normally structure perception. They recognize that the distinctions between individual and cosmos, between self and other, between order and chaos, are artificial constructs imposed by the greater will. This recognition brings with it a terrible clarity. To see through the illusion of separation is to understand that all suffering is one suffering, that all consciousness is one consciousness temporarily divided against itself. Well, consequences war. One to lead event at that all sort of milan. 1 second missing starfire. The appropriate response to this recognition, from the perspective of the Frenzied Flame, is not to seek to heal the divisions but to annihilate them entirely. If separation is the source of suffering, then the elimination of separation through universal destruction becomes a form of cosmic mercy. The yellow flame that characterizes the Frenzied Flame's power is described as emerging from the eyes of its followers, eventually replacing their eyes entirely. This image is deeply symbolic. The flame burns away ordinary vision, the vision that sees division and distinction, and replaces it with a different kind of sight that perceives only unity. The madness that accompanies this transformation is the mind's attempt to process a form of consciousness that mortal cognition was never designed to handle. Shabriri, the figure most closely associated with spreading the Frenzied Flame's influence, embodies this cosmic mission of dissolution. Originally punished for the crime of slander, for speaking words that created division and conflict, Shabriri had his eyes gouged out, but this punishment only made him a more perfect vessel for the Frenzied Flame's power. Without physical eyes, he could see more clearly the underlying unity that physical vision obscures. After his death, Shabriri gained the ability to inhabit other bodies, to speak through other voices, to spread the Frenzied Flame's influence by possessing those who were already suffering or desperate. His possession of Yura, the bloody finger hunter, demonstrates how the Frenzied Flame works. It does not typically corrupt the innocent, but rather offers itself as a solution to those who have already been driven to extremes by the failures of the existing order. The case of Vike provides perhaps the most tragic example of how the Frenzied Flame recruits its champions. Vike was a tarnished warrior who came closer than anyone else to becoming the next Elden Lord. He had gathered the necessary great runes, proven himself in battle, demonstrated all the qualities that should have made him the greater will's chosen champion. But when he learned that achieving his destiny would require the sacrifice of his finger maiden, he could not bring himself to complete the journey. Instead, Vike sought an alternative path that would allow him to spare his maiden's life. This search led him to the Three Fingers and the promise that he could become a lord of a different sort, one who would not require such sacrifices because he would burn away the very system that demanded them. Vike's fall is not a simple story of corruption, but a tale of how even the most heroic individuals can be driven to cosmic rebellion when the price of righteousness becomes unbearable. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending represents the ultimate victory of this cosmic force. Should the Tarnished choose to inherit the Frenzied Flame and become its avatar, the result is not the establishment of a new order, but the systematic annihilation of the old one. The Erdtree burns, the lands between are consumed, and everything that the greater will created returns to the undifferentiated state that existed before the fracturing of the One Great. This ending is often described as one of the bad endings, but this characterization may miss something important about what the Frenzied Flame represents. From one perspective, the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is indeed catastrophic. It destroys everything and everyone in the lands between. But from another perspective, it can be seen as the ultimate act of cosmic mercy, freeing all consciousness from the artificial divisions and hierarchies that create suffering. The Frenzied Flame's vision is not simply destruction for its own sake, but destruction as a path to a form of liberation that cannot be achieved within the constraints of the existing order. It represents the recognition that some systems are so fundamentally flawed, so structurally unjust, that they cannot be reformed or redeemed. They can only be abolished entirely. Yet the terrible irony of the Frenzied Flame is that its solution to the problem of suffering is to eliminate suffering by eliminating the capacity to suffer, which is to say by eliminating consciousness itself. In seeking to heal the wound of separation that the greater will created by fracturing the one great, the Frenzied Flame would return reality to a state where neither suffering nor joy, neither love nor hatred, neither meaning nor meaninglessness could exist. The conflict between the greater will and the Frenzied Flame thus represents one of the fundamental tensions in existence itself. The tension between the need for structure and the desire for freedom, between the stability that comes from order and the vitality that comes from chaos, between the safety of boundaries and the terror of limitless possibility. The visual manifestations of the Frenzied Flame are as horrifying as they are mesmerizing. The yellow flames that burst from the eyes of the afflicted, the way flesh begins to melt and merge, the gradual dissolution of individual form into undifferentiated matter, all of these represent the physical reality of what it means to be consumed by a force that seeks to undo creation itself. Those who survive encounters with the Frenzied Flame, even briefly, report sensations of overwhelming unity, of boundaries dissolving, of the self expanding to encompass all existence before collapsing into nothingness. It is a form of cosmic ecstasy that is indistinguishable from cosmic horror, a glimpse of what might lie beyond the illusion of individual existence. Among the outer gods that influence the lands between, few are as intimately connected to themes of suffering, sacrifice, and transcendence as the entity known as the Formless Mother, also called the Mother of Truth. This ancient power represents a fascinating middle ground between the cosmic order of the greater will and the absolute chaos of the Frenzied Flame, offering instead a path to divinity through the embrace of pain and the ritual sanctification of blood. The Formless Mother's very name reveals important aspects of her nature. She is formless, lacking the defined structure that characterizes other divine entities. Unlike the greater will, which manifests through clearly defined symbols and hierarchies, or even the Frenzied Flame, which has its recognizable yellow fire, the Formless Mother exists as a presence rather than a form, an influence rather than an entity. This formlessness is not a limitation, but a strength. It allows her to inhabit spaces and consciousness that more defined powers cannot reach. The title, Mother of Truth, is equally significant. Truth, in the context of Elden Ring's lore, is not simply factual accuracy, but a deeper form of reality that lies beneath surface appearances. The truth that the Formless Mother embodies appears to be the recognition that suffering, pain, and bloodshed are not unfortunate accidents of existence, but fundamental aspects of reality that must be acknowledged and embraced rather than denied or suppressed. This truth stands in direct opposition to the greater will's vision of a perfected order where suffering would be eliminated through proper structure and hierarchy. The Formless Mother suggests instead that suffering is not a problem to be solved but a sacred mystery to be explored, that pain is not a defect in the cosmic design but a pathway to enlightenment and transformation. The most prominent mortal associated with the Formless Mother is Mohg, Lord of Blood, whose relationship with this outer god illustrates both the terrible power she offers and the profound transformation she demands. When Mohg first encountered the Formless Mother in the depths beneath the lands between, he was already an outcast, one of the Omen twins, hidden away because their appearance challenged the aesthetic perfection that the Golden Order demanded. In that moment of contact, something fundamental changed within Mohg. His cursed blood, previously a source of shame and isolation, erupted with divine fire. The curse that had made him an outcast became the foundation for a new form of power. This transformation reveals one of the Formless Mother's key characteristics. She does not typically choose the blessed or the favored, but rather those who have been wounded, rejected, or cursed by the existing order. The blood magic that flows from the Formless Mother is not mere sorcery but a form of divine communion. Blood, in this context, represents life force in its most concentrated form, the liquid essence of vitality that connects all living beings. By working with blood, followers of the Formless Mother are working with the fundamental substrate of life itself. But this is not the clean golden life force celebrated by the Golden Order. The blood associated with the Formless Mother is explicitly described as cursed blood that carries within it the marks of suffering, rejection, and transformation. This accursed quality is not a contamination but a blessing. It is blood that has been touched by divine power and made into something more than mere biological fluid. The blood flame that emanates from this divine blood represents a synthesis of destruction and creation that is unique among the magical forces in Elden Ring. Unlike the purely destructive power of the Frenzied Flame or the preservative power of the Golden Order, blood flame destroys in order to transform, burns in order to purify and elevate. The fire that burns in accursed blood is not the fire of annihilation, but the fire of apotheosis. Mohg's ultimate goal of elevating Miquella to godhood through the power of the Formless Mother reveals another crucial aspect of this outer god's nature. She possesses the ability to create new gods, to lift mortals to divine status through the proper application of her blood-based rituals. This power of elevation places her in direct competition with the greater will, which jealously guards the prerogative of creating and recognizing divine authority. The method by which this elevation occurs is telling. Rather than the clean institutional process through which the greater will selects and empowers its Empyreans, the Formless Mother's path to divinity requires immersion in blood, acceptance of corruption, and willing participation in practices that the Golden Order would consider abhorrent. Her gods are not chosen from among the pure and worthy, but forged from those who have been marked by suffering and made strong through their embrace of that suffering. In the shadow of the Erdtree expansion, we learn that the Formless Mother's influence extends far beyond Mohg and his immediate followers. The blood-fiend tribes of the Land of Shadow also serve this outer god, conducting their own blood rituals and maintaining their own traditions of communion with the Mother of Truth. This suggests that the Formless Mother's influence is ancient and widespread, predating and extending beyond the particular crisis that led to Mohg's transformation. The blood-fiend tribe's practices provide additional insight into the Formless Mother's nature. Their rituals are described as enriching their blood with fire, suggesting a process of gradual transformation through repeated contact with divine power. This is not a one-time conversion, but an ongoing practice of spiritual development, a path of gradual deification through the systematic embrace of the Formless Mother's power. The relationship between the Formless Mother and the concept of truth becomes clearer when we consider what kinds of truths her followers are meant to acknowledge. These are not comfortable truths about cosmic justice or divine benevolence, but harsh truths about the role of violence, suffering, and sacrifice in the maintenance of life. The Mother of Truth reveals that existence feeds on pain, that growth requires destruction, that love and hate are more closely connected than comfortable philosophies would admit. This truth is particularly relevant to understanding the dynamics of power in the lands between. The Golden Order presents itself as a system of justice and righteousness, but it maintains its power through the systematic exclusion and oppression of those it deems unworthy. The Formless Mother's truth reveals the blood that underlies all power structures, the violence that maintains all order, the suffering that purchases all stability. In embracing this truth, followers of the Formless Mother do not become monsters, but rather beings who acknowledge monstrosity as an inescapable aspect of existence. They do not revel in cruelty for its own sake, but recognize cruelty as a tool that can be used for transcendent purposes. They do not seek to eliminate suffering, but to transform it into a source of power and wisdom. The Dynasty Mausoleum, Mohg's domain hidden deep beneath the earth, represents the physical manifestation of the Formless Mother's influence. This blood-soaked palace, with its grotesque architecture and pools of accursed blood, is not a place of horror but a temple, a sacred space where the transformative power of suffering is honored and channeled toward divine purposes. The followers who gather in this place, the sanguine nobles and other devotees of the bloody faith, have willingly embraced the Formless Mother's vision, They understand that the path to transcendence requires the acceptance of pain, the sanctification of blood, and the transformation of curse into blessing. Their devotion is not blind worship but conscious participation in a cosmic vision that offers meaning and power to those whom the existing order has abandoned. The Formless Mother's vision of reality stands as a powerful alternative to both the sterile perfection of the greater will and the complete dissolution of the Frenzied Flame. She offers a path that acknowledges the necessity of suffering while providing a framework for finding meaning and power within that suffering. Hers is not the promise of an end to pain, but the promise that pain can be transformed into something sacred and powerful. Deep within the swamplands of Caelid, where the very air seems to pulse with malevolent life and the ground rises with alien growth, we encounter the influence of one of the most terrifying and misunderstood outer gods, the entity known as the god of rot. This ancient power represents forces of decay, corruption, and transformation that operate according to a logic so alien to human understanding that even witnessing its works can drive observers to madness. Yet to dismiss the god of rot as simply a force of destruction would be to misunderstand its fundamental nature. This outer god embodies one of the most essential principles of existence: the recognition that death and decay are not the opposite of life, but rather necessary components of life's eternal cycle. In the cosmic vision of the god of rot, putrefaction and renewal are not separate processes but different phases of a single continuous transformation. The god of rot was, according to ancient lore, sealed away long ago by those who feared its power and failed to understand its purpose. This sealing represents more than mere imprisonment. It reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of the role that decay plays in the cosmic order. By attempting to eliminate rot and corruption from reality, the forces that sealed this outer god were essentially trying to stop the natural cycles that allow for renewal and rebirth. The consequences of this cosmic misunderstanding become apparent when we examine the nature of the scarlet rot that plagues the lands between. This is not natural decay, but rather a form of hyper-accelerated putrefaction that emerges when the natural processes of death and renewal are disrupted and suppressed. Like water building up behind a dam, the forces of decay and transformation that were meant to flow naturally through reality instead accumulated until they burst forth in an overwhelming flood. Malenia, the blade of Miquella, serves as the unwilling avatar of this sealed outer god, and her tragic story illustrates the terrible beauty and cosmic significance of the rot's influence. Born as an Empyrean, one of those rare individuals capable of serving as a vessel for divine power, Malenia was inhabited by the god of rot from birth. This was not a blessing she sought or welcomed, but rather a cosmic burden imposed upon her by forces beyond her control or understanding. The relationship between Malenia and the rot within her is one of the most complex divine possessions depicted in Elden Ring's lore. Unlike other characters who embrace their connection to outer gods, Malenia spent her entire life fighting against the influence growing within her. She wielded her legendary skill with the blade not just against external enemies, but in a constant internal battle against the cosmic force that sought to transform her into something beyond human recognition. This resistance gives Malenia's story a tragic dimension that speaks to broader themes about fate, free will, and the price of divine power. She represents the cosmic victim and individual caught between competing divine forces and forced to bear the consequences of conflicts she had no part in creating. Her brother Miquella's attempts to cure her of the rot can be understood as one of the most poignant examples of love confronting cosmic inevitability. The unalloyed gold that Miquella created specifically to ward off the influence of outer gods represents a fascinating attempt to create a space of resistance within a cosmos dominated by divine powers. This gold, untainted by any external influence, was meant to provide protection against the corruption that emanates from all forms of divine contact. That even this miraculous substance could only slow rather than stop the rot's influence speaks to the fundamental power of the forces involved. The Scarlet Rot's method of operation reveals important insights into the god of rot's nature and purpose. The rot does not simply destroy, it transforms. When it infects living beings, it does not kill them in the conventional sense, but rather converts them into new forms of life more suited to the rot god's vision of reality. The kindred of rot that emerge from areas affected by the scarlet bloom are not corpses animated by necromancy, but rather evolutionary adaptations, new forms of consciousness that can thrive in environments that would be lethal to unmodified life. This transformative aspect of the rot connects to deeper themes about evolution, adaptation, and the cost of progress. From the god of rot's perspective, the current forms of life in the lands between represent evolutionary dead ends, forms that have become too rigid, too resistant to change, too invested in maintaining their current state to adapt to changing cosmic conditions. The rot serves as a catalyst for necessary transformation, forcing evolution that would otherwise take millennia to occur naturally. The scarlet blooms that mark significant manifestations of the rot's power are described in terms that emphasize both their beauty and their terror. These are not random outbreaks of disease, but rather carefully orchestrated transformations, moments when the god of rot's influence becomes strong enough to reshape reality on a massive scale. Each bloom represents a step toward the ultimate goal, the transformation of the entire world into a form that can serve as a proper vessel for this outer god's consciousness. Malenia's 3 prophesied blooms reveal the gradual nature of this cosmic transformation. Her first bloom occurred during her battle with Raiden in Caelid, an event so catastrophic that it transformed an entire region into a nightmare landscape of perpetual decay. Her second bloom takes place during her boss fight with the Tarnished, marking another step in her transformation from mortal Empyrean to divine avatar. The third and final bloom, should it occur, would complete her metamorphosis into a true goddess of rot. This gradual transformation process reflects an important aspect of how the god of rot operates. Unlike other outer gods that might seek immediate and total transformation, the god of rot works through slow, patient, inexorable change. The god of rot works through slow, patient, inexorable change. Autobulus. Patient, inexorable change. Patient. It understands that lasting transformation requires time to take root, that hasty conversions often result in unstable outcomes. The rot spreads slowly but inevitably, giving those it touches time to adapt to their new forms of existence. The lake of rot, hidden deep beneath the lands between, provides perhaps the most direct glimpse we have of what reality would look like under the complete dominance of the god of rot. This vast underground sea of scarlet corruption is not a place of death, but rather of alien life forms of existence, so transformed by the rot's influence that they no longer resemble anything that evolved under the current cosmic order. The creatures that inhabit the lake of rot are not monsters in the conventional sense, but rather successful adaptations to an environment thoroughly transformed by the god of rot's influence. They represent evolutionary possibilities that could never emerge under the constraints of the current cosmic order, life forms that have embraced rather than resisted the transformative power of decay and renewal. The Astel, natural born of the void, which lurks in the depths connected to the lake of rot, may represent the ultimate expression of the god of rot's evolutionary vision. This cosmic entity, with its crystalline structure and alien intelligence, embodies what life might become when freed from the constraints of conventional biology and allowed to evolve according to principles of pure transformation. The tragedy of the god of rot is that its influence is experienced as curse rather than blessing by those who encounter it, because the current inhabitants of the lands between evolved under different cosmic conditions. They lack the spiritual and biological frameworks necessary to appreciate or benefit from the transformations the rot offers. They experience its touch as corruption rather than evolution, as death rather than metamorphosis. Yet for those rare individuals who can embrace rather than resist the rot's influence, it offers gifts that no other power can provide: the ability to thrive in environments that would kill others, to adapt rapidly to changing conditions, to see beauty in forms of existence that terrify the unenlightened. These are the rewards that await those who can accept the god of rot's vision of reality. The sealed nature of this outer god creates unique dynamics in how its influence manifests. Unlike other cosmic forces that can work through established institutions and recognized channels, the god of rot must work through cracks in reality, through individuals who have been touched by its power against their will, through the gradual spread of influence that cannot be easily detected or countered by the established order. In the frozen heights of the mountaintops of the giants, where howling winds carry echoes of an ancient war, and the very landscape bears scars of cosmic conflict, we encounter the influence of one of the most primordial and misunderstood outer gods, the entity known as the Fell God. This ancient deity of fire and forge represents forces that predate the Golden Order by eons, embodying a form of divine power that is both more primitive and more fundamental than the sophisticated cosmic architectures we have examined thus far. The Fell God's domain is not the refined manipulation of reality that characterizes other outer gods, but rather the raw elemental force of creation through destruction. This is fire in its most essential form, not the controlled flame of hearth and forge, but the wild conflagration that reduces entire worlds to ash and provides the raw material from which new realities can be built. It is the fire of stars being born and civilizations being consumed, the flame that burns in the heart of every forge and the cremation pyre of every empire. The relationship between the Fell God and the fire giants reveals important insights into how this outer god operates. Unlike other cosmic entities that might work through individual chosen champions or elaborate institutional structures, the Fell God appears to have formed a collective bond with an entire race. The fire giants were not simply worshippers of this deity, but rather living vessels for its power, their massive bodies serving as furnaces in which the Fell God's flame could burn. This collective incarnation represents a fundamentally different approach to divine manifestation. Where other outer gods might seek to elevate individual mortals to godhood, the Fell God distributed its essence throughout an entire people, making each fire giant a partial avatar of its cosmic flame. Their great size, their resistance to cold, their mastery of fire magic, all of these characteristics can be understood as adaptations that allowed them to serve as living repositories for a fragment of divine fire. The war between Queen Marika and the fire giants takes on deeper significance when understood as a conflict between competing cosmic visions. This was not merely a political struggle for territorial control, but rather a theological war between different understandings of what reality should become. The Fell God represented an older, more chaotic approach to Cosmic Order 1, where change occurred through periodic conflagrations that swept away the old to make room for the new. The Greater Will's Order, by contrast, sought to eliminate such cyclical destruction, to create a stable reality where change occurred only according to divine plan rather than through natural catastrophe. From this perspective, the fire giants and their Fell God represented an existential threat, not just to the Golden Order's political control, but to its fundamental vision of how reality should operate. The prophetic significance of the Fell God's flame adds another layer of complexity to this cosmic conflict. The flame of ruin was prophesied to burn the Erd Tree, to consume the very symbol and source of the Golden Order's power. This prophecy was not merely a threat, but a cosmic inevitability, a recognition that all orders, no matter how perfect they might appear, eventually become corrupt and must be consumed to make way for renewal. Marika's response to this prophecy reveals the fundamental weakness in the Greater Will's approach to cosmic order. Rather than finding ways to work with the natural cycles of destruction and renewal, the Golden Order sought to prevent them entirely. The war against the fire giants was an attempt to eliminate the very possibility of cosmic renewal, to create a reality so perfect and stable that it would never need to be replaced. The curse placed upon the last fire giant to tend the Fell God's flame for all eternity represents one of the most cruel and short-sighted acts of divine punishment in Elden Ring's lore. By forcing this being to preserve the very force that the Golden Order sought to eliminate, Marika ensured that the power to destroy her order would survive even after the apparent victory over the fire giants. This curse reveals an important truth about the relationship between order and chaos, between preservation and destruction. The Greater Will's order requires the existence of the very forces it opposes. Without the threat of destruction, there would be no need for preservation. Without the possibility of change, the concept of stability becomes meaningless. The Fell God's flame serves as the shadow that defines the light of the Golden Order. The furnace golems introduced in the shadow of the Erd Tree expansion provide additional insight into the Fell God's nature and the fear it inspired in other powers. These massive war machines, with their horned visages designed to evoke the Fell God's appearance, were created specifically to terrorize the Hornsent during Messmer's crusade. The psychological warfare implicit in this design choice reveals how deeply the image of the Fell God was embedded in the collective unconscious of the lands between. That these golems were powered by the bodies of giants suggests a perverse form of communion with the Fell God's power. Rather than allowing the giants to serve as willing vessels for divine flame, Messmer's forces enslaved dead giants to power war machines designed to spread terror and destruction. This represents a corruption of the Fell God's original relationship with the giants, turning sacred communion into mechanical exploitation. The fire monks who tended the Fell God's flame after the giants' defeat provide another perspective on this outer god's influence. These human servants were not born with the natural resistance to flame that characterized the giants, yet they found ways to work with and channel the Fell God's power. Their gradual transformation under the influence of the flame they tended reveals how sustained contact with this cosmic force can reshape not just individual consciousness, but entire biological systems. The madness that eventually consumed many of the fire monks illustrates one of the fundamental challenges of working with the Fell God's power. Unlike other forms of divine influence that might operate through gradual transformation or intellectual understanding, the Fell God's flame demands a more direct and visceral form of communion. Those who cannot withstand its intensity are not simply rejected but consumed, transformed into something that retains human form, but no longer possesses human consciousness. The one-eyed visage that appears on the torsos of the fire giants and manifests during the final battle with the last of their kind reveals important iconographic elements associated with the Fell God. The single eye suggests a form of cosmic vision that sees reality differently than ordinary perception, perhaps a perspective that perceives the underlying unity beneath apparent multiplicity, or the inevitable end that awaits all temporary forms. This cyclopean imagery connects the Fell God to broader themes about vision, insight, and the terrible knowledge that comes with divine awareness. To see with the Fell God's eye is to perceive the impermanence of all structures, the futility of all attempts at permanent order, the cosmic fire that burns at the heart of all existence, waiting to consume whatever temporary forms reality might assume. The flame of ruin that burns eternally in the giant's forge represents more than mere fire. It is a physical manifestation of cosmic principle, a piece of fundamental reality made visible and tangible. This flame cannot be extinguished because it represents something that exists at a more basic level than the physical phenomena through which it manifests. It is the fire that burns in every star, the heat that drives every chemical reaction, the energy that powers every transformation. The ritual significance of this flame becomes apparent when we consider its role in the various endings of Elden Ring. To burn the Erd Tree and enable the transformation of the cosmic order, the tarnished must kindle themselves with the flame of ruin. This is not simply using fire as a tool, but rather accepting the Fell God's flame into oneself, becoming a conduit through which this cosmic force can accomplish its destined work. This communion reveals the Fell God's fundamental nature as a force of necessary destruction. Unlike the nihilistic annihilation promised by the Frenzied Flame, the Fell God's destruction serves a purpose. It clears away the old to make space for the new. It is the fire of the forest floor that enables new growth, the forge fire that melts down old metal to create new tools, the cremation flame that returns the dead to the cosmic cycles from which they emerged. Before the golden light of the Erd Tree illuminated the lands between, before Queen Marika established her eternal order, before the very concept of grace was known to mortal beings, another power held dominion over the realm of the dead and the mysteries of mortality itself. This ancient entity, known to us primarily through its envoy the Twinbird, represents one of the oldest and most fundamental forms of cosmic authority, the power to determine the meaning and mechanism of death itself. The outer god of death embodies a vision of mortality that stands in stark contrast to the artificial interventions that would later characterize the Golden Order, where Marika's regime would seek to control and manipulate death. Through the binding of destined death, this earlier cosmic authority worked with death as a natural process, a fundamental aspect of existence that required reverence rather than suppression. The twin bird, serving as the primary envoy of this death god, presents one of the most intriguing symbolic figures in all of Elden Ring's cosmology. Depicted as a creature with two heads, one bearing bright red feathers, the other deep blue plumage, the twin bird embodies the dual nature of death itself. The red head represents the violent, passionate aspect of death. Death in battle, death through conflict, death that comes with fire and blood. The blue head represents the peaceful, contemplative aspect of death, natural expiration, quiet passing, death as rest and release. This duality suggests that the outer god of death understood mortality as encompassing multiple modes and meanings rather than a single uniform experience. Unlike the later Golden Order, which would attempt to standardize death through institutional control, this ancient power celebrated the diversity of ways in which life could come to its end. The death birds, offspring or servants of the twin bird, served as the practical administrators of this cosmic order. These skeletal, ethereal creatures were not merely harbingers of doom, but rather sacred functionaries in a complex system of death rites and spiritual transformation. Their role was to ensure that death occurred according to proper cosmic principles, that the transition from life to whatever comes after proceeded in harmony with divine will. The ghost flame that burns within and around the deathbirds represents a fundamentally different relationship between death and fire than what we encounter in other cosmic systems. Unlike the destructive flames of the fell god or the maddening fire of the frenzied flame, ghost flame is described as cold burning, suggesting a form of spiritual rather than physical combustion. This is the fire that burns away the attachments that bind souls to material existence without destroying the essential consciousness that survives bodily death. The ancient death rites administered by the deathbirds reveal sophisticated understanding of the spiritual mechanics of mortality. Rather than simply disposing of corpses, these rituals were designed to facilitate the proper transition of consciousness from embodied to disembodied states. The ghost flame kilns where bodies were burned were not crematoriums but transformation chambers, places where the dross of material existence was burned away to reveal the purified spiritual essence beneath. The vengeful spirits that arose from these ghost flame cremations were not accidents or failures of the death rites, but rather intended outcomes. These spirits represented the emotional and psychic residues that needed to be processed and resolved before full spiritual liberation could occur. Rather than suppressing or banishing such spirits, the death god's system provided mechanisms for their expression and eventual resolution. This approach to death reveals a cosmic philosophy based on acceptance rather than control, on working with natural processes rather than attempting to override them. The outer god of death appears to have understood that mortality is not a problem to be solved, but rather a mystery to be honored, a transition to be facilitated with proper reverence and understanding. The concept of meaningful death that emerges from descriptions of this ancient order suggests that the death god valued quality over quantity, significance over mere duration. Those who faced death with courage and honor were granted special recognition and assistance. Death in battle was particularly celebrated, suggesting that the conscious choice to risk one's life for principles or purposes greater than mere survival was seen as a form of spiritual achievement. The eclipse symbolism associated with this death god provides additional insight into its cosmic significance. Eclipses represent moments when the normal order of celestial bodies is temporarily disrupted, when hidden aspects of reality become visible, when the boundary between day and night becomes ambiguous. In the context of death symbolism, the eclipse suggests the liminal space between life and death, the twilight realm where transitions occur. The connection between eclipses and the granting of life to soulless bones suggests that the death god possessed not only the power to facilitate death, but also the ability to reverse it under certain circumstances. This was not the crude resurrection magic that would later characterize some forms of necromancy, but rather a sophisticated understanding of the conditions under which consciousness could be called back into material form. The gradual suppression of the death god's influence and the forgetting of proper death rites represents one of the great spiritual tragedies of Elden Ring's cosmological history. In attempting to eliminate death through institutional control, the Golden Order not only failed to achieve its goal, but actually made death more terrible and meaningful transition more difficult. The persistence of death hexes and ghost flame sorceries, even after the official suppression of the death god's worship, suggests that spiritual realities cannot be eliminated through mere institutional decree. The forces that the death god represented, the need for proper transition, the requirement for spiritual guidance during mortality, the cosmic necessity of death as transformation, rather than termination, continue to operate regardless of whether they are officially acknowledged. In the volcanic depths of Mythology, where lava flows like rivers of molten hatred, and the very air shimmers with supernatural heat, we encounter one of the most enigmatic manifestations of ancient power, the entity known as Igle, the god-devouring serpent. This massive ancient creature, while perhaps not an outer god in the strictest sense, possesses abilities that blur the line between mortal beast and cosmic force. It embodies a form of hunger that threatens not just individual lives, but the very concept of divinity itself. The name God-Devouring Serpent reveals the creature's fundamental nature and cosmic significance. This is not a being that simply kills gods, but one that literally consumes them, absorbing their essence and making their power part of its own. The serpent's immortality, its inability to truly die, suggests connections to forces beyond ordinary comprehension. In a universe where divine authority represents the ultimate form of power and cosmic legitimacy, a creature capable of devouring gods represents an existential threat to the entire spiritual hierarchy that structures reality. The serpent's association with Mythology connects it to one of the most primordial landscapes in the lands between. This volcanic region predates the Golden Order by eons, representing geological and spiritual forces that emerged from the Earth's molten core long before the current cosmic dispensation established itself. The serpent's presence in this ancient place suggests that it represents powers that predate and potentially transcend the current arrangement of divine authorities, though whether it serves an outer god or operates independently remains unclear. The Temple of Igle, where worship of the serpent was conducted in ages past, reveals that this creature was not always seen as a monster, but rather as a legitimate object of religious devotion. The ancient cult that practiced this faith fashioned weapons in the serpent's image and conducted blood sacrifices, suggesting they understood the serpent's consumption as having spiritual or cosmic significance rather than mere predation. Rykard's decision to offer himself to the serpent during the shattering represents one of the most dramatic transformations in the entire conflict among the demigods. This was not a moment of madness or desperation, but rather a calculated choice to embrace a form of power that transcended the limitations of ordinary divinity. By allowing himself to be devoured, Rykard sought to become something greater than a mere demigod, a being capable of challenging and potentially consuming the gods themselves. The blasphemous nature of this transformation cannot be overstated. In a cosmos where divine hierarchy represents the fundamental organizing principle of reality, the choice to become a god-eater represents the ultimate act of cosmic rebellion. Rykard was not simply rejecting the authority of the greater will, but positioning himself as a threat to divine authority itself, regardless of which particular god might claim supremacy. The phrase, "Together, we will devour the very gods," that Rykard speaks during his boss encounter, reveals the serpent's ultimate ambition. This is not a creature motivated by simple hunger or territorial instinct, but rather by a cosmic vision that envisions the elimination of all divine authority. From the serpent's perspective, gods represent artificial impositions upon natural reality, power structures that constrain and limit the free flow of cosmic energy. The man-serpents that emerge from the union of Rykard and Igle represent a new form of life that combines human consciousness with serpentine power. These creatures are not simply monsters, but rather evolved beings that have transcended the limitations of both humanity and ordinary serpentine existence. They embody the serpent's vision of what reality could become when freed from the constraints imposed by divine authority. The volcanic environment of Mythology provides the perfect setting for the serpent's activities. Volcanoes represent points where the Earth's molten core breaks through to the surface, where the hidden foundations of reality become visible and active. In this context, the serpent can be understood as a creature of the depths, something that emerges from the fundamental layers of reality that underlie all surface appearances. The relationship between the god-devouring serpent and broader serpentine symbolism throughout Elden Ring's lore suggests that Iglay may be connected to other serpentine entities and powers, the abyssal serpent that dwells within Mesmer, ancient serpent deities mentioned in various item descriptions, and even the serpentine imagery associated with certain aspects of the Crucible. Whether these represent manifestations of a single serpentine outer god or multiple independent serpentine forces remains a subject of speculation among those who study the deeper mysteries of the lands between. Serpentine symbolism traditionally represents wisdom, transformation, and the cyclical nature of existence. Serpents shed their skins, symbolically dying and being reborn in an endless cycle of renewal. They move close to the earth, suggesting connection to fundamental rather than elevated realities. Their ability to swallow prey larger than themselves represents a form of consumption that transcends normal physical limitations. In the context of the god-devouring serpent, these traditional associations take on cosmic significance. The serpent's consumption of gods may represent a necessary form of cosmic renewal, a process by which ossified divine structures are broken down and their essence recycled into new forms of spiritual reality. From this perspective, the serpent serves as a cosmic digestive system, processing and transforming divine authority rather than simply destroying it. High above the terrestrial conflicts that rage across the lands between, beyond the reach of earthbound armies, and the immediate influence of the Erdtree's golden light, celestial powers observe and influence the world below through mechanisms as subtle as they are profound. Among these cosmic entities, the moon deities represent some of the most enigmatic and intellectually sophisticated forms of divine authority in Elden Ring's cosmological hierarchy. The Dark Moon, which Ranni encountered during her youth, represents perhaps the most significant of these celestial powers in terms of its impact on Elden Ring's narrative. Described as cold and leaden, this entity embodies a form of cosmic authority that is simultaneously distant and intimate, alien and personal. The Dark Moon's influence on Ranni was not a violent possession or gradual corruption, but rather an intellectual and spiritual awakening that revealed new possibilities for understanding and reshaping reality. Ranni's relationship with the Dark Moon illustrates a fundamentally different approach to divine communion than what we see with other outer gods. Rather than being chosen as a vessel or gradually transformed by cosmic influence, Ranni appears to have encountered the Dark Moon as an equal, engaging with it through dialogue and negotiation rather than submission and service. This suggests that the moon deities operate through consensus and collaboration rather than domination and control. The sorceries associated with the moon deities reveal their connection to intellectual and mystical traditions that predate and transcend the Golden Order's emphasis on faith-based miracles. Glintstone sorcery, with its emphasis on study, experimentation, and the manipulation of cosmic forces through understanding rather than devotion, represents a completely different approach to engaging with divine power. Where miracles require faith in established truths, sorceries require the courage to explore unknown possibilities. The Academy of Raya Lucaria serves as the institutional embodiment of the moon deities' influence on mortal civilization. This center of learning and magical research represents an alternative to the faith-based institutions of the Golden Order, offering a path to power and understanding that depends on intellectual achievement rather than divine favor. The Academy's scholars seek to comprehend and harness cosmic forces through study and experimentation, rather than prayer and submission. The suppression of Carian astrology during the height of the Golden Order reveals the competitive relationship between lunar and solar forms of cosmic authority. Astrology, the practice of reading fate and destiny in the movements of celestial bodies, represents a challenge to the Golden Order's claim to exclusive divine authority. If fate can be read in the stars rather than received through grace, then the Greater Will's monopoly on cosmic guidance becomes questionable. The restoration of astrology through Ranni's questline, and the eventual Age of Stars ending, represents more than mere political change. It signifies a fundamental shift in how cosmic authority operates in the world. The Age of Stars promises a reality where destiny is determined by celestial mechanics rather than divine decree, where fate can be studied and understood rather than simply accepted as unchangeable divine will. The Dark Moon's role in this cosmic revolution is particularly significant because it represents a form of divine power that explicitly supports mortal agency rather than divine control. Unlike other outer gods that seek to transform reality according to their own visions, the Dark Moon appears to value the capacity of conscious beings to choose their own destinies and create their own meanings. The Age of Stars is not imposed by divine fiat, but achieved through mortal effort, guided by celestial wisdom. The symbolism of darkness associated with the Dark Moon should not be understood as malevolent or evil, but rather as representative of the unknown, the mysterious, the realm of infinite possibility that exists beyond the boundaries of established knowledge. Darkness in this context represents not the absence of light, but rather the presence of possibilities that have not yet been illuminated and defined by conscious awareness. The cold quality attributed to the Dark Moon suggests a form of cosmic detachment that allows for objective assessment of reality, without the emotional biases that characterize more passionate forms of divine influence. This coldness is not indifference, but rather the clarity that comes from seeing reality as it truly is, rather than as one might wish it to be, or fear it might become. The connection between lunar influence and the manipulation of gravity reveals another dimension of the moon deity's power. Gravity represents one of the fundamental forces that structure physical reality, the invisible bonds that hold the cosmos together. Mastery of gravitational forces implies understanding of cosmic mechanics at the deepest possible level, suggesting that the moon deities possess knowledge that extends far beyond mere magical tricks. As our exploration of the major outer gods draws toward its conclusion, we must acknowledge that the cosmic landscape of Elden Ring contains numerous other divine entities and mysterious forces whose influence on the world remains more subtle or whose nature remains more obscure. These lesser-known cosmic powers remind us that the universe contains depths of mystery that may never be fully plumbed, forces that operate according to principles we have barely begun to understand. Among the most intriguing of these figures is the Gloam-eyed Queen, whose true nature remains one of Elden Ring's deepest mysteries. What we know for certain is that she was an Empyrean, one of those rare individuals capable of becoming a vessel for divine power chosen by the Two Fingers long ago. She wielded the Rune of Death, also known as Destined Death, channeling its god-slaying power through her sacred sword to create the fearsome Black Flame. The Black Flame associated with the Gloam-eyed Queen embodies perhaps the most directly threatening power to divine authority encountered in Elden Ring's lore. This is not merely fire that burns mortal flesh, but rather flame specifically capable of killing gods themselves. Whether the Gloam-eyed Queen was herself an outer god, the avatar of an outer god, or simply an Empyrean who wielded divine power, remains deliberately ambiguous in the lore. The Godskin apostles and Godskin nobles who served her embody the god-killing principle in their very form and function. These beings did not merely worship a deity associated with death, but rather actively participated in the systematic hunting and slaying of divine entities. Their practice of fashioning clothing from the skin of slain gods represents not mere trophy-taking, but rather a theological statement, a demonstration that gods are not transcendent, eternal principles, but rather material entities subject to death, decay, and utilitarian use. The defeat of the Gloam-eyed Queen by Malekith the Black Blade represents one of the most significant cosmic battles in Elden Ring's deep history. This was not merely a political conflict between competing divine authorities, but rather a war between fundamentally different visions of what divine authority should mean. The Queen represented the principle that gods should be subject to death like any other beings, while Malekith served as the enforcer of the Greater Will's vision of controlled, institutional death. The primeval current itself represents something that may be closer to a fundamental cosmic principle than a traditional outer god with consciousness and intent, yet its influence on reality is so pervasive and fundamental that it deserves recognition as a cosmic force of the highest order. The current appears to be the underlying substrate from which all magical phenomena derive their ultimate power, the cosmic river of energy that flows through and connects all aspects of supernatural reality. The connection between the primeval current and glintstone sorcery reveals important insights into what this force might represent. Glintstone, with its crystalline structure and ability to focus and channel magical energy, could be understood as solidified fragments of the primeval current, itself cosmic energy, that has been condensed into physical form and made available for manipulation by conscious beings. This interpretation suggests the current is less a god with will and more a fundamental force of nature, like gravity or electromagnetism, but operating on magical rather than physical principles. The scholars associated with the Academy of Raya Lucaria, particularly the primeval sorcerers Lusat and Azur, devoted their lives to achieving direct communion with the primeval current rather than working through intermediary magical systems or established theoretical frameworks. Their transformation into beings of living glintstone suggests that such communion is possible, but comes at the cost of ordinary human consciousness and physical form. Among other mysterious entities, we must consider the possibility of cosmic forces associated with specific geographical regions or natural phenomena. The entity that may be connected to storms and tempests, the forces associated with deep ocean and primordial waters, the cosmic principles that govern the behavior of crystals and minerals, all of these represent potential areas of divine influence that operate according to their own logic and serve their own cosmic purposes. The relationship between these lesser cosmic forces and the major outer gods reveals important insights into the structure of cosmic authority in Elden Ring's universe. Rather than a simple hierarchy with a few powerful entities controlling all cosmic functions, the universe appears to contain a complex ecosystem of divine forces that interact, compete, and collaborate in ways that create the overall pattern of cosmic evolution. The fragmented and incomplete nature of our knowledge about these entities reflects broader themes about the limits of mortal understanding when confronted with cosmic forces that operate on scales and according to principles that transcend ordinary comprehension. The universe of Elden Ring contains mysteries that may be literally incomprehensible to minds shaped by terrestrial existence and temporal consciousness. Yet this incomprehensibility does not necessarily represent a limitation or failure of understanding. It may instead reflect the fundamental nature of cosmic reality, that the universe is so rich, so complex, so creatively abundant that no single perspective, no matter how elevated or enlightened, can encompass its totality. The existence of cosmic forces that remain mysterious may be essential to maintaining the dynamic tension that drives cosmic evolution. As we draw near the conclusion of our comprehensive exploration of the outer gods, it becomes essential to step back from the details of individual cosmic entities and examine the broader patterns and philosophical implications that emerge from their collective presence in Elden Ring's universe. These cosmic forces, in their diversity and conflict, present us with fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, authority, and meaning. The very existence of multiple outer gods, competing for influence over reality, suggests that the universe of Elden Ring operates according to pluralistic rather than monotheistic principles. No single cosmic force, no matter how powerful, possesses exclusive authority over all aspects of existence. This cosmic pluralism creates a universe characterized by tension, conflict, and ongoing change rather than stable hierarchy or eternal order. This pluralistic structure has profound implications for how individual consciousness relates to cosmic authority. Rather than existing in a universe where divine will is singular and unambiguous, conscious beings in Elden Ring's cosmos must navigate competing cosmic visions and choose between alternative understandings of what reality should become. This choice places enormous responsibility on individual consciousness, while simultaneously making genuine cosmic agency possible. The relationship between consciousness and cosmic force that emerges from our exploration suggests that awareness itself may be the fundamental cosmic principle from which all other divine authorities derive their power. The outer gods' need for mortal vessels, their dependence on conscious beings to enact their will in physical reality, their vulnerability to rebellion by their chosen champions. All of these factors point toward consciousness as the ultimate cosmic currency. This perspective transforms our understanding of the relationship between mortals and gods in Elden Ring's universe. Rather than representing a relationship between superior and inferior beings, the interaction between outer gods and conscious entities may represent a form of cosmic symbiosis where divine power and mortal awareness each provide capabilities that the other lacks. The gods need consciousness to actualize their potential. Consciousness needs cosmic power to transcend its limitations. The theme of transformation that runs through the influence of all the outer gods suggests that change, rather than preservation, may be the fundamental cosmic principle. Every major cosmic force we have examined offers some form of transformation: the Greater Will's transformation through order, the Frenzied Flame's transformation through annihilation, the God of Rot's transformation through decay and renewal. Even the most conservative cosmic forces work through change rather than simple preservation. This emphasis on transformation raises important questions about identity, continuity, and the value of existing forms of consciousness and reality. If all cosmic forces work through transformation, then the question becomes not whether change will occur, but rather what kind of change will be embraced and who will direct the process of transformation. The cosmic conflicts in Elden Ring represent competitions between different visions of what consciousness and reality should become. The tragic dimension that characterizes many of the relationships between outer gods and their mortal servants suggests that cosmic power may be inherently incompatible with ordinary human consciousness and values. Malenia's struggle against the rot within her, Mohg's transformation through blood magic, Rykard's consumption by the god-devouring serpent, all of these stories suggest that cosmic communion comes at costs that may ultimately exceed its benefits. Yet this tragic dimension does not necessarily argue against cosmic engagement, but rather emphasizes the importance of approaching cosmic forces with appropriate wisdom and preparation. The characters who suffer most from their relationships with outer gods are often those who either did not choose their cosmic connections or who lacked adequate understanding of what such connections would require. The possibility of resistance to cosmic influence, represented by figures like Miquella and his unalloyed gold, suggests that consciousness may possess inherent capacities for maintaining independence from divine authority. This resistance represents not mere stubbornness or ignorance, but rather the assertion of consciousness's right to determine its own development and destiny rather than accepting transformation imposed from external cosmic sources. The relationship between knowledge and cosmic power reveals the crucial role that understanding plays in determining how cosmic influences affect individual consciousness. The scholars of the Academy, the sorcerers who study the primeval current, the characters who achieve different forms of cosmic communion, all demonstrate that knowledge and wisdom significantly influence how cosmic forces are experienced and integrated. The cyclical nature of cosmic history that emerges from our examination of different ages and divine successions suggests that no cosmic arrangement, no matter how perfect or powerful, represents a final solution to the fundamental problems of existence. The age of the ancient dragons gave way to the Golden Order, which in turn faces challenges from multiple alternative cosmic visions. This cyclical pattern implies that cosmic evolution may be an ongoing process, rather than a progression towards some ultimate stable endpoint. The role of suffering and conflict in cosmic development represents one of the most challenging philosophical dimensions of Elden Ring's cosmological vision. Nearly every cosmic force we have examined works through or produces forms of suffering: the Greater Will's oppressive order, the Frenzied Flame's annihilating madness, the God of Rot's transformative decay. This prevalence of suffering raises difficult questions about whether cosmic evolution necessarily requires pain or whether alternative paths might be possible. Yet the suffering associated with cosmic forces in Elden Ring often serves transformative rather than purely destructive purposes. The pain experienced by characters like Malenia, Mohg, or Messmer, while terrible, also grants them capabilities and insights that would be impossible to achieve through more comfortable paths. This suggests that suffering may be not an unfortunate side effect of cosmic engagement, but rather an essential mechanism through which consciousness expands beyond its original limitations. The environmental and ecological dimensions of cosmic influence reveal how deeply these divine forces shape not just individual consciousness, but the entire structure of physical reality. The scarlet rot that transforms Caelid, the ghost flame that burns in ancient ruins, the golden light that emanates from the Erd Tree all demonstrate that cosmic forces work through material reality rather than existing as purely spiritual phenomena. And so we reach the end of our journey through the mysterious realm of Elden Ring's outer gods. We have discovered how these enigmatic entities shape reality from beyond the veil of mortal comprehension, each offering their own vision of what existence should become. From the greater will's rigid order to the frenzied flame's chaotic dissolution, from the god of rot's transformative decay to the Formless Mother's bloody truths, we have witnessed the vast spectrum of cosmic authority that influences every soul in the lands between. These outer gods represent more than mere antagonists or sources of power. They embody fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, authority, transformation, and meaning that extend far beyond the boundaries of any fictional universe. In their conflicts and collaborations, their triumphs and failures, their moments of cosmic beauty and cosmic horror, we see reflected the eternal tensions that exist whenever consciousness encounters forces greater than itself. The legacy of the outer gods continues to shape the lands between long after the events of Elden Ring's narrative conclude. Their influence flows like invisible rivers through the landscape of reality, creating opportunities for transformation, growth, suffering, and transcendence that will challenge and inspire conscious beings for ages to come. The cosmic dance they perform, sometimes graceful, sometimes violent, always magnificent in its scope and complexity, reminds us that existence itself is an ongoing creative act whose ultimate meaning remains to be determined by those with the courage to engage with forces beyond their immediate comprehension. What makes the outer gods particularly fascinating is not just their individual powers or philosophies, but the way they interact to create a complex cosmic ecology. The greater will's attempt to establish perfect order inevitably creates the conditions for the Frenzied Flame's rebellion. Suppression of the god of rot leads to catastrophic outbreaks of scarlet bloom. The binding of destined death corrupts the natural cycles that the ancient death god once maintained. Each cosmic force exists in relationship to all the others, and the health of the cosmos depends on maintaining some form of dynamic balance between competing divine visions. The Tarnished, as they journey through the lands between, becomes more than just a warrior or would-be lord. They become a navigator of cosmic forces, someone who must understand and engage with multiple forms of divine authority in order to achieve their goals. Every choice they make, which outer god to serve, which cosmic vision to embrace, which form of transformation to accept, shapes not just their personal destiny, but the future of reality itself. The various endings available in Elden Ring represent different possible futures, each dominated by different cosmic principles. The Age of Fracture maintains the greater will's authority but leaves reality broken and incomplete. The Age of Order seeks to perfect the Golden Order's vision, eliminating all ambiguity and chaos. The Age of Stars replaces divine authority with celestial mechanics, offering freedom at the cost of cosmic uncertainty. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending returns everything to primordial unity through universal destruction. Each represents a valid cosmic philosophy. Each comes with its own costs and benefits. What's particularly intriguing is that Elden Ring refuses to provide easy answers about which cosmic vision is correct. The greater will's order brought stability but also oppression. The Frenzied Flame offers liberation but only through annihilation. The god of rot promises transformation, but at the cost of current forms of life. The Formless Mother grants power to the wounded but requires the embrace of suffering. There are no purely good or evil outer gods, only different cosmic philosophies with different priorities and different costs. This moral ambiguity extends to the mortal servants of these outer gods as well. Mohg is both a victim of the Golden Order's cruelty and a perpetrator of his own horrors. Malenia fights heroically against the rot within her yet unleashes catastrophic destruction when she finally gives in. Rani seeks freedom from divine control, but achieves it through manipulation and murder. The Tarnished themselves must make morally complex choices, often choosing between different forms of harm rather than between clear good and evil. The outer gods also raise profound questions about the nature of divinity itself. In most mythologies, gods are portrayed as fundamentally different from mortals. More powerful, more knowledgeable, perhaps immortal, but still recognizably conscious beings with personalities and motivations. The outer gods of Elden Ring are something stranger and more alien. They seem to operate at a level of reality that precedes individual consciousness, representing fundamental cosmic principles that happen to possess some form of awareness. This alien nature of the outer gods creates a kind of cosmic horror that pervades Elden Ring's world. Characters like Melania and Mohg don't simply serve powerful beings. They are being gradually transformed into vessels for forces that operate according to logic incomprehensible to human minds. The horror comes not from violence or cruelty, but from the dissolution of human meaning and purpose in the face of cosmic forces that regard individual consciousness as merely raw material for their incomprehensible designs. Yet there is also beauty in this cosmic vision. The golden light of the Erd tree, the scarlet blooms of the rot, the yellow flames of frenzy, the dark moon hanging in the night sky, all of these represent moments when cosmic forces become visible to mortal perception, when the underlying patterns that structure reality briefly reveal themselves. These moments of terrible beauty remind us that the cosmos operates according to principles that transcend human categories of good and evil, beautiful and ugly, meaningful and meaningless. The dragon god's abandonment of Placidusax adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of outer gods. Even these cosmic forces are not necessarily eternal or unchanging. They can depart, leaving their servants behind to wait in vain for a return that may never come. This suggests that the outer gods themselves may be subject to even greater cosmic forces, or that they exist in a complex ecology where they can be driven out by competitors or environmental changes. The question of what lies beyond the outer gods remains one of Elden Ring's deepest mysteries. If these entities came from somewhere outer, what is the nature of that outer realm? Are there even greater cosmic forces that the outer gods themselves serve or flee from? The game hints at layers of cosmic reality extending beyond what we can perceive, suggesting that even our exploration of the outer gods only scratches the surface of a much deeper cosmic architecture. The role of the Elden Ring itself in this cosmic ecology deserves special consideration. This object appears to be more than just a symbol of the greater will's authority. It seems to be a kind of cosmic operating system, a set of fundamental rules that govern how reality functions in the lands between. Different outer gods seek to either control the Elden Ring, destroy it, or replace it with their own cosmic operating systems. The shattering represents a moment when this fundamental cosmic structure broke down, creating opportunities for alternative visions of reality to emerge. The relationship between the outer gods and the Crucible, the primordial form of life that existed before the current cosmic order, suggests that there may have been periods in the lands between's history when no outer god held dominance, when life evolved according to more chaotic and organic principles. The suppression of Crucible aspects by the Golden Order indicates that the greater will saw this primordial vitality as a threat to its vision of ordered perfection. This raises the possibility that the natural state of the lands between might be one of cosmic plurality and organic chaos, and that the domination by any single outer god represents an artificial imposition on reality's inherent tendency toward diversity and change. From this perspective, the shattering could be understood not as a catastrophe, but as a return to a more natural state of cosmic competition and evolution. The various sacred seals, talismans, and weapons associated with different outer gods reveal how cosmic power is channeled and focused through material objects. These artifacts are not merely tools, but rather points of connection between mortal consciousness and cosmic force. Using them requires more than just physical strength. It demands a spiritual affinity with the cosmic principle they embody. This suggests that the outer gods shape reality not just through direct intervention, but through the gradual accumulation of material culture that embodies their philosophies. The merchants who were buried alive and called upon the Frenzied Flame, the fire giants who served as living vessels for the fell god, the deathbirds who administered ancient death rites. All of these represent different models of how mortal communities can organize themselves around outer god worship. Some outer gods seem to prefer individual champions, while others work through entire cultures and civilizations. This diversity of approach suggests that cosmic forces adapt their methods to suit different circumstances and opportunities. The persistence of ancient ruins throughout the lands between the temples to forgotten gods, the monuments to vanished civilizations, the architectural styles that predate the current age, all remind us that the outer gods we encounter in Elden Ring's present are only the latest in a long succession of cosmic authorities. The lands have seen many ages come and go, each dominated by different divine forces, each leaving behind traces that continue to influence the present. This deep history creates a kind of cosmic archaeology, where careful study of ruins and artifacts can reveal information about outer gods whose names have been forgotten by history. The player who explores thoroughly discovers hints of cosmic forces that are never explained in detail, suggestions of divine authorities that rose and fell long before the current conflict between the greater will and its challengers. The ending we choose as Tarnished doesn't just determine the political future of the lands, between it determines which cosmic force will dominate the next age, which philosophy of existence will structure reality, which form of consciousness will be favored, and which will be suppressed. This enormous responsibility weighs on every decision we make throughout the game, every alliance we form, every cosmic power we choose to accept or reject. As you drift towards sleep, consider the profound questions the outer gods raise. What does it mean to be conscious in a universe shaped by incomprehensible cosmic forces? How can individual meaning and purpose survive in the face of divine powers that regard mortal concerns as insignificant? Is it better to resist cosmic influence and maintain autonomy, or to embrace transformation and gain power at the cost of humanity? Can different cosmic visions coexist, or must there always be conflict between competing divine authorities? These questions have no easy answers, which is perhaps why they continue to fascinate us. Elden Ring's outer gods remind us that the greatest mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but rather profound questions to be contemplated, paradoxes that reveal deeper truths the more we examine them from different angles. The cosmic horror of Elden Ring lies not in jump scares or grotesque imagery, but in the gradual realization that we exist at the mercy of forces we cannot fully understand or control. Yet there is also cosmic wonder in the recognition that these forces create beauty, meaning, and possibility alongside their destruction and transformation. The universe of Elden Ring is neither friendly nor hostile to human concerns. It is something stranger and more fascinating, a cosmos that operates according to its own inscrutable logic, while occasionally granting us glimpses of its underlying patterns. The outer gods dance their eternal dance, sometimes drawing closer together, sometimes pushing apart, creating through their movements the ever-changing patterns we call reality. We mortals are caught up in this dance whether we wish it or not, our lives shaped by forces that existed before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. Yet we are not entirely powerless. Our choices matter, our understanding grows, our capacity for wisdom and courage can influence which cosmic forces prevail and which cosmic visions become reality. In the end, perhaps the greatest gift the outer gods offer is not power or knowledge, but perspective, the ability to see ourselves and our concerns as part of a much larger cosmic story, to recognize that our struggles and triumphs echo across scales of time and space we can barely imagine. We are both infinitely small in the face of cosmic forces and infinitely significant as the conscious beings through whom those forces must work to achieve their aims. The Lands Between stands as a testament to what happens when multiple cosmic forces compete for dominance over a single reality. It is a world of terrible beauty and beautiful terror, of suffering that transforms and power that corrupts, of gods that die and mortals that ascend. It is a world where nothing is permanent except change itself, where every age eventually gives way to the next, where every cosmic order eventually breaks down or is overthrown. And perhaps that is the ultimate truth the outer gods teach us, that existence itself is not a static condition but an ongoing process, not a problem to be solved but a mystery to be experienced. The cosmic dance will continue long after our individual stories end, but while we live we have the opportunity to participate in that dance, to add our own small movements to the grand choreography of cosmic evolution. As you settle into sleep, let these thoughts dissolve into dreams. Let the outer gods recede into the shadows from which they emerged, neither forgotten nor fully understood but held in that liminal space between waking knowledge and sleeping wisdom. The mysteries we have explored tonight are vast enough to fill countless dreams, deep enough to sustain a lifetime of contemplation. The Greater Will's golden light, the Frenzied Flame's yellow fire, the Formless Mother's accursed blood, the God of Rot's scarlet bloom, the Fell God's ancient flame, the Death God's ghostly fire, the Serpent's consuming hunger, the Dark Moon's leaden glow, all of these images may dance through your dreams tonight. Symbols of cosmic forces that shape not just a fictional world, but our own understanding of meaning, purpose, and the eternal questions that consciousness faces when it encounters the infinite. Rest well, tarnished. The outer gods will still be there when you wake, their mysteries undiminished, their influence unending, their cosmic dance eternal. And perhaps, in the space between sleep and waking, you will glimpse some small fragment of the truth they guard, the secret of what it means to be conscious in a universe shaped by forces beyond comprehension, the knowledge of how to maintain meaning and purpose in the face of cosmic indifference, the wisdom to choose which transformations to accept and which to resist. The night is deep, the cosmos is vast, and the outer gods wait in the spaces beyond mortal understanding. But for now, let sleep claim you. Let dreams take you on their own journey through realms where the boundaries between self and cosmos, between mortal and divine, between dream and reality, become as fluid as the cosmic forces themselves. May your dreams be filled with cosmic wonder rather than cosmic horror, with the beauty of transformation rather than the terror of dissolution, with the hope that consciousness might yet find meaning in a universe shaped by incomprehensible gods. And may you wake refreshed and ready to face whatever cosmic forces the waking world presents, armed with the knowledge that even outer gods are not omnipotent, that even divine authority can be questioned, and that conscious beings possess powers of understanding and choice that make them more than mere pawns in cosmic games. Sleep now, and let the endless dance of the outer gods become the rhythm of your dreams, the eternal mystery that makes existence profound rather than mundane, the cosmic background against which all our small human dramas play out their meaningful moments. The lands between will still be there tomorrow, still shaped by forces beyond mortal ken, still offering opportunities for those brave enough to engage with powers greater than themselves. And in your dreams, perhaps you will dance alongside Placidusax in his place beyond time, or witness the fracturing of the One Great, or understand for a moment the terrible clarity that comes with the Frenzied Flame's vision, or feel the transformative power of Scarlet Bloom, or commune with the cold wisdom of the Dark Moon, or taste the bloody truth the Formless Mother offers to those who have suffered. These are dreams worth having, visions worth contemplating, mysteries worth carrying with you into the waking world. For the outer gods of Elden Ring teach us that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than our ordinary consciousness can grasp, that divinity comes in forms we might not recognize or welcome, that transformation is the only constant in a cosmos too vast and ancient for any single vision to permanently dominate. Rest now in the knowledge that you have journeyed deep into cosmic mysteries, that you have contemplated forces that shape reality itself, that you have walked for a time in the shadow of the outer gods. And when you wake, you will carry with you some fragment of that cosmic perspective, some small understanding of how individual consciousness relates to divine force, some appreciation for the terrible beauty of a universe governed by powers beyond our control, but not beyond our comprehension. The outer gods bid you good night, each in their own way, the Greater Will with its golden grace, the Frenzied Flame with its promise of unity through dissolution, the Formless Mother with her blessing of sacred suffering, the God of Rot with its gift of transformation through decay, and all the others with their own cosmic benedictions. May these divine forces watch over your dreams and grant you glimpses of the truths they guard, the mysteries they embody, the eternal questions they pose to every conscious being who dares to look beyond the mundane world into the cosmic depths where reality itself is forged. Good night, Tarnished. May your rest be deep, your dreams profound, and your morning bright with the light of understanding. The outer gods will still be there when you wake, eternal and incomprehensible, terrible and beautiful, forever shaping the cosmos in their own images while conscious beings like us struggle to find meaning in the patterns they create. The cosmic dance continues, but for now, let it continue without you. Rest, dream, and let the mysteries of the outer gods wash over you like waves from an infinite ocean, each one carrying truths too large for waking consciousness to hold but perfect for the limitless space of dreams. Sleep well, and may the outer gods grant you the peace that comes from accepting that some mysteries need not be solved, only experienced and appreciated for the wonder they bring to existence itself.